So one thing I wanted to show is that we have set the bake folder. Right now, if I would drag it in a different folder, you can see it has added this to the correct folder, which is also nice. So we have control regarding where this stone is going. Very good. All right, and I will delete this again. So I don't need this material. So we know that's working. Let's go back to Houdini. Because of course we want to have a couple size stones. And once we have those stones, we maybe want to vary a couple of these attributes. The material is going to stay the same for all of them. The output name is going to be different because we're going to have different indices. Then we have our bake folder, which is going to be also the same. And of course, the input shape is the most important, that we're going to make that variable. Then we need to be able to automatically save all of our stones. And in the end, we also want to add all of them automatically to a data table, because that's going to be a great help later. For now, let's first place a for. Going to be our initial for loop. That's what I want to do, is to make two variations. One variation is going to be, or let's keep it simple. Let's do just one variation. Let's just do the length of this brick. So I'm going to set this to the count, and this is going to be by count. Perfect. All right. And let's do this through a little control node. So I will have a null node, going to be the place where will happen. And over here, let's have a folder. Let's do a multi-parm. And in here, we're going to have at first the width. And we're going to have another multi-parm. Call this with folder directory. And let's do the same for let's add a quote. Set this to be a parm as well. A lower bar. There we go. So these are going to be the variations we are generating. Let's say we have again for our initial cube. So those are the two values we will be changing. So that's 20 centimeters and one, let's say 40 centimeters, and for the height 15 and 0.25, for example. Those are going to be our variations. And we need two for loops to do this properly. Basically want to generate all boxes with values. And we need to width, right, over here, put it like this. Actually, up, we basically just transform. If we have our input box to be 1, also to make this just a box by 1 by 1, now we can do a transform to get the correct size. This transform is going to get number, right? Perfect. And now, of course, we need to make this number variable. So let's create a meta import node. This node has a detail attribute with the iteration. And let's fetch this. All right. Stepping 1, and now over here we need this attribute. We're getting from the metadata 1. We need it to be iteration attribute, which is on here, and 0 because it's an array with length 1. And right now, well, this won't work. Still a couple of things that we need. And I got one page incorrect. Let me double check. There. Ah. This one now returns a 0 because this detail iteration attribute right now, this is returning not the number you want. So let's show you what it is returning over here. Right now, this is actually returning a 0, even though this person is working. It's right now returning a 0 because for the very first iteration, this is 0. So this needs to be, and right now you can see the second iteration, which is 1. There's always one thing that you kind of have to worry about in the beginning. So we're basically going to be adding 1 to this number. Take the channel again, and let's add 1 to this expression. Right now we see the 0.4, which is correct. We would do single pass. You can see we have our 2 different, so which is exactly what we want. Input. So right now we are merging each iteration. So my wireframe, and I'll disable single pass. Fetch feedbacks. Now I'll fetch input. Now we have added 1 variation for this. Perfect. And let's do the same for the height setting. All right. For you, let's change this thing the height now. And you, of course, shouldn't be this channel anymore. Let's just copy paste this to the height channel. This means we now have our 4 different objects. Let's also make sure we have some suffixes for all these objects. So we should have 4 objects right now. This looks correct, they're all matched together, doesn't really matter. It's create. We also want this suffix to be added to the input shape. So let's width. Let's add a primitive. Be a float. Maybe I will change this to a string later. And we actually need the same thing over here. Copy this, add this value. Right now, this object, if we go into our geometry spreadsheet, I'm pressing Alt brackets, open this thing. Geometry spreadsheet, a very nice thing. This is where we see all the data of our node. So you can see this one is now set correct, and we have 2 different ones, each for cube. We also want this to be there for height. the name should of course be right now. And it needs to be pointing to the exact same. What did I do? Font size. Let me just copy this over again. Don't know which button I pressed. There we go. We're gonna do the same again. Ctrl C and paste this in here. Go. I'll set this to height. Now we have a little setup to create this variable input for our different boxes. All right. Right now we could use a class. You could order this the way you want. I'm just gonna use a connectivity node. That's how I will be giving them their class IDs. Primitive, integer, class. There we go. Now we have 4 class IDs. That's how we can basically separate them again. If you say a for loop for each connected piece, this actually does this for you already. Set the primitives right now. This means we have a nice and variable input for our stone gen. This for loop right now, if we go over single pass, we'll have those 4 in there. Perfect. Throw this into stone gen. Let him do its thing. And so right now it will only do this for one. I've only selected one, of course. All right, we have our stone. We have our little variable set up for our stones. Perfect. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to let this cook for a little bit, and I'll see you guys in a bit. Before we actually start generating everything, we need to make this a little bit more variable. We have our stone right now, but it needs to have some attributes to be a little bit more variable. Right now I'm using 01 for this name. And what I've learned is that it's nice to just have an index. So we're going to use the class for this instead of set the name to be the width and the height. I'm just going to use an index, because we're going to store the height and the width in a different manner later on. So over here we have our name. Right now it's just set to stone 01. And this has to be, first let's maybe just add something on top. So we have the name over here. Name and name. There you go. This is the base name of our object. Over here. And then, because we have it right now set to primitive, we already have Unreal output name. So let's make sure we're getting this as well. We're going to ask for a primitive attribute. We're going to ask for, let's, I'll create a node a little bit later on. We'll be calling it attributes. Then the primitive number, as you can see on the top, we have the attribute name and then the attribute index. So the primitive number doesn't really matter. I'm going to be using 0 for that. Then we have the attribute name, which is Unreal output name. And then we have the index, which is 0. That's a null node. Let's call it which is fine. Let me check. If I did able to evaluate. Of course, it's not a fixed function. There we go. There we go. And what is our aim? Our Unreal, which is of course the thing we didn't have yet. This is not the Unreal output name we needed. We needed a class attribute, which is something that we are losing over here, as far as I'm aware. Yes. So attribute. Let's do an attribute copy. Or let's even just grab it from the top. We need a class and an output name. There we go. That should be more a variable name. The material should be the same, and the bake folder should also be the same. So at this moment, this is the variability we want, but we do need to store a couple more attributes. I'm actually going to delete this name attributes. Let's see where I regenerated this thing. Oh, damage. Toggle or delete it for now. And of course we're cooking. And then after this we're going to place an attribute copy to make sure we have those with attributes also stored on there. Because those are the ones we want to add to our to the data table, of course. We actually also want to have an attribute create for the depth. We're not setting this variably, so it doesn't matter. If code, let's say this was same as this number. Right now it's set to 1. Let's set the depth to be 0.3. There we go. So this is now our stone. Number, set it to be as well. Go. It again. Disable this thing for now for a little bit. Let's make sure that those heights attribute copy. So set bottom. Okay. And we want primitive attributes. And we have height and depth are the ones stored in this as well. Primitive float. Reload this thing. There we go. Recook it. And now we have the depth, height, and values we want so badly. Alright. Right now we have 4 stones all mushed in the same spot. And oh, also one more thing that I forgot is that if we over here, if we go with import node, and let's set the C to be variable, so we have a little bit more variation. Otherwise, why would we? There we go. Let's rerun this. Next up, let us place a for each. This is for each named primitive. We're going to use Unreal output name for this. Name. From here on, we have our stones separated again. And with a null node, we'll be fetching that name attribute. When we're going to write it out, we're going to place a file node. I like to separate them for now. We could also keep them together. For the workflow, this works fine. Then it's going to be relatively similar to our initial one. First, get the correct one. So we want a string attribute this time. Let's do primitive the correct place, which is our name. First primitive. Then Unreal output name. And we don't need an index anymore because we're asking for string attributes. And that looks all right. Copy over the start. And let's put geo at the end. Let's run this file because they of course don't exist. Let's write them instead. And let's look again. Correct spot of where they should have appeared. And as you can see right now, they have appeared the way we intended. Alright, so we have our files. We can now load them into Unreal to see if they all plot. Even though if I go to a different place, I drag them in here. We'll do them now all in the background, and over here we have our 4 stones variable sizes. And we can fine. Let's go towards the data table now.